This student of mine went from having a non-existent lower half to explosive power in just 8 weeks. And this student of mine's lower half went from weak to powerful in just 2 days. In this video, I'm going to reveal the 5 key steps that turned their game around. And it's the same steps that took my hits from weak soft line drives to driving baseballs deep into the outfield and even out of the park. See, if you stick with me through these steps 1 through 5, you'll see how quickly your lower half can unlock the power you've been missing. And if you watch until the end of this video, I'll share with you exactly how you can get a free live swing breakdown where I'll personally or my team break down your swing or your son's swing and tell you exactly what you need to do to hit with more power or be more consistent. More on that later. Now, there are 5 main problems when it comes to the lower half. 1, lack of back hip loading. 2, poor leg kick or stride. Number 3, poor weight transfer or balance. Number 4, lack of hip rotation. And number 5, no engagement of the legs. Now, if you're doing one of these, it will almost certainly reduce your power as a hitter and definitely your consistency as well. But don't worry, what I'm going to share with you today will solve all these problems. But let's go a little bit deeper in each one of those problems. Now, let's start with problem number 1, which is lack of back hip loading. See, many players really struggle with properly loading into their back hip, which results into losing power before they even start their swing. See, without loading into the back hip and leg correctly, it's almost impossible to generate power and use the legs properly. So now let's talk about problem number 2, which is a poor leg kick or stride. See, many players are confused what they should do. Should they leg kick or should they stride? So what they do is they'll rush their stride or they'll hang too long, and now they're behind the baseball and it leaves them swinging underneath, or if they rush, they're on top of the baseball, and that causes a lot of ground balls and inconsistent hits. Now let's talk about problem number 3, which is poor weight transfer and balance. So after they've rushed their stride or they hung too much on their leg kick, what they do now is they struggle with proper weight transfer. They put too much weight onto their front leg, and so now they're around the baseball, and that's when they're hitting a lot of ground balls. Or they're too far back and now they're underneath baseballs. They don't properly distribute the weight so that they can be consistent and use their lower half properly. So let's talk about problem number 4, which is lack of hip rotation. So many players really struggle with proper hip rotation. So what they do is they just spin off the baseball, and this really takes their bat path off the baseball, and they end up hitting a lot of weak ground balls and rollovers, and they believe it's their swing, but it's their lower half that's causing that issue. See, without proper hip rotation, all that energy you're creating will just go to waste. Now let's talk about problem number 5, which is no engagement in the legs. So what you'll see is you'll see a lot of players take swings and there's no engagement of the legs. They're just swinging the bat with all upper body, okay? And so what this does is 2 things. 1, they swing and they shorten their swing path down because they're not allowing themselves to really get through the baseball. 2, they're not getting all the power that they possibly can into the ball. So those balls that they are hitting are not as hard and as far as they actually could go if they use their lower half. Now, unfortunately, what most coaches and hitting gurus teach today causes these problems. They teach you very outdated or extreme methods today that causes players to become very inconsistent, roll over, lunge, and it doesn't allow them to be the hitter that they possibly can be. And to give you an example of that, when I grew up, I heard squish the bug. And what that caused me to do was swing around the baseball, hit a lot of ground balls, and I would roll my wrists over, and I couldn't hit an outside pitch. The other method I was taught a little bit later was scissors. They told me to do this as I'm swinging, end up scissoring my feet just like that to hit the baseball, because it would help you not spin off the baseball. And what that causes you to do is lunge forward. And I actually believe that's something that naturally happens when you hit. It's not anything you actually practice. So I did all of these methods plus a ton more, and it caused me to roll over the baseball. It caused me to be an inconsistent hitter. And I know a lot of you are going through it now because I see it. And the players that I do coach, they tell me the same exact thing, especially the parents. But what I'm going to teach you today will help you solve all these problems. I remember when I first started doing this, my line drives over the middle infielders' heads started to turned into gap-to-gap shots. And then the gap-to-gap shots started turning to flying over the outfielders' heads. And then I started hitting home runs. So what I'm going to do is teach you this so that you can have that transformation as well. Now, after years of trial and error and learning from the best players that ever played this game, I realized that the key to unlocking your lower half power lies in the C.O.I.L.S framework. And it's a step-by-step approach I teach my players in the 100X Power program, where I help players tap into their full power so they can play to their full potential. Now, before I share with you the 5 steps of the C.O.I.L.S framework, I create the ultimate lower half playbook for you. Here's what's inside the lower half playbook. You'll get the step-by-step framework on how to use the lower half properly. And it'll be everything I'm sharing with you today so that you can have it, so you can start implementing it ASAP. So you'll get the lower half checklist so that you know you're doing everything correctly. You'll get the lower half cheat sheet so you can grab for quick reference. You'll also join my newsletter called the Prospect Blueprint with nearly 5,000 baseball coaches, parents, and players, where I share my secrets so you can take your game to that next level. So if you're interested in implementing exactly what I'm going to share with you today and take your game to that next level, link is below. So the first step in the framework is the C, as you can see, and this stands for coil and load. So the first thing we want to do is we want to load into this back hip, and we want to load on top of this back leg. And the best way to explain that is what I tell my hitters. I say that think about this front knee turning inward towards this back knee, or if that doesn't resonate with them, I'll tell them exactly what my mentor, Hall of Famer, told me. His name is Dusty Baker, and he said, you want to show your back pocket towards the pitcher. And when you show your back pocket towards the pitcher, what that does is it allows you to sit into that back leg. It allows you to be on top of that leg. And that's important because a lot of young baseball players, what they do is they end up just moving all their weight on the outside of their leg, and then when it comes to striding out towards the baseball, what they do is they pop out of their lower half. As I like to say, climb out of their lower half. But if we stay on top of our lower half and we sit into this back hip, what's going to happen is that we're going to feel our quad, we're going to feel our glute, and it's going to allow us to really stay in our lower half when we start to stride towards the baseball, as opposed to jumping off our back side. And if you do that correctly, what's going to happen is you'll start to see wrinkles form where the quad area is, and that tells you you're really sitting into that back leg and hip. And that will solve problem number 1, which is lack of back hip loading. And to give you an example of this, look how Shohei Ohtani loads into his back hip. This allows him to sit over his back leg, and notice how he coils, showing his back pocket to the pitcher. This is proper loading into the back hip. So the next step in the framework is the O, and that stands for an orchestrated step. So after we've loaded into our back hip and our leg, and we're feeling our quad, we're feeling our glutes get a little burn back there, what we're doing now is we're going to take a controlled step towards the baseball. And I personally prefer a mid-leg kick. And what that is that it's not too high and it's not too low. It's not just putting the foot down, although I do like getting the foot down early if you're that type of player. But I like a mid-leg kick because it gives you a little rhythm, it gives you a little timing, and it allows you to be repeatable. It doesn't create too many unnecessary movements, so you can repeat it over and over. And that's the key here, is repeating a lower half movement that you can do over and over, so you can get the results of consistent hard contact, but at the same time be able to generate power. So what I like here is a preferred mid-leg kick, and what we're doing here is we're controlling it. And here's the key: we want to ride the back leg, and what that means is we want to keep the chest over that back leg, or think about your nose or your chin, anything that's going to keep you over this back leg as you create that forward movement into the baseball. I know there's a lot of undersized players, and I work with a ton of them in my 100X Power program, and when I tell them to do this orchestrated strap, I prefer a little forward movement so they can use that body of theirs to drive the baseball. So we're going to, take a controlled movement towards the baseball, a little forward movement, keep that chest over that back leg so that we're able to go into the next step. But before we do that, this solves problem number 2. And to give you an example of this, look how Christian Yelich takes an orchestrated step with some forward movement by riding the back leg and keeping his chest over it. And by doing this, he keeps his chest over his back leg, and this allows him to maintain control and balance. So the next step in the framework is I, and that stands for initiate landing. So after we've loaded into that back hip and we've taken our orchestrated step, we're now going to land with our front foot slightly open. I always say about 45 degrees. And what that's going to allow us to do is create a window so that we can get our hands to the baseball and start hitting more line drives and make more consistent hard contact. But it also allows us to rotate properly with our hips. It's setting us up for the next step in the framework. So we're going to land at 45 degrees. And what we want here is we want 60% of our weight on our backside and 40% on our front leg. Now, I know when you're in the game, you're not going to be thinking about this, but when you're in practice, when you're hitting off a tee, make sure that you're doing this. And that's what I do with all my hitters. We focus on getting proper weight distribution, because this is going to set us up for, the following 2 parts of the framework. So now there's 60% here and 40% here. And before I go into the next framework, what I want to talk about is the actual stride length. So for me, what I believe in is that you should have about a bat length when it comes to the stride. And the reason why is because that will allow you to be athletic. It'll put you in a very good position where your head is in between your body and what I like to call the power triangle. You can see head here and then my knees, I'm in between, and I'm in this power triangle, which is going to allow me to make more consistent hard contact because I'm going to be balanced. So that solves problem number 3, which is weight distribution and balance. And to give you an example of this, see how Stephen Kwan properly initiates the landing position by keeping 60% of his weight on his back leg and 40% on his front leg. Now, the next step is the L, and that's launching and firing the hips. So after we've landed and we're in a good foundation with our weight 60% here, 40% here, now we're going to fire this back hip into the baseball. Now, what most players do is that they just spin off the baseball, and that causes them to, basically roll over and hit ground balls. What we want to do is we want to pinch the ground with our big toe. You can see here how I'm starting to pinch the ground, and what that does, it'll keep me inside the baseball, so then I'll be able to, hit that ball to right center, hit the ball to left center, and basically hit line drives. So that's what we want to do. We want to pinch the ground with our big toe, but we then want to fire this back hip into the baseball, okay? And if you do this correctly, you'll start to see this back knee start to go downward into the ground, and it'll solve problem number 4, which is lack of hip rotation. And to give you an example of this, look at Mookie Betts as he fires his back hip first and then pinches the ground with his back big toe, making his back knee dive towards the ground. So the next step in the framework is the S, and what we're doing here is we're stabilizing our hips and creating a firm front side. So now, after we've pinched the ground and we're firing our back hip into the baseball, what we're going to do now is we're going to use this front foot heel as an anchor to stop our hips, okay? A lot of young baseball players, I see this, the players that I coach, what they do is they land on the ball of their feet, which is good, but what they do is they stay on the ball of their foot, and that keeps their hips going forward. So what we want to do now is we want to use the front foot heel as an anchor so that it creates a firm front side. It stops our hips and allows us to take all the energy and everything we've created throughout our lower half into the baseball. And this is how you start driving the baseball for extra base hits. This is how you use the lower half properly so that you can hit those bombs, you can hit those gap-to-gap doubles, and you can increase those extra velocity numbers. This is how you do it. If you do that correctly, this will solve problem number 5, no engagement of the legs. And to give you an example of this, this. Look how Juan Soto anchors his front foot heel into the ground, creating a firm front side, which causes his back leg to come off the ground and also creates a thrusting-like motion into the baseball. Now, to further explain how effective this is, I'm going to share with you a few stories of players who went through my 100X Power program and we worked on their lower half and it transformed their game. Sam has always had good hand-eye coordination, been able to put the ball in play. He's a bit undersized and was primarily a singles hitter. After working with Jermaine, Sam is now utilizing his lower body more and driving the ball in the gaps on a consistent basis. Jermaine has given Sam the confidence and skill set to show you don't have to look like Mike Trout or Aaron Judge to consistently get extra base hits. Jermaine takes pride in the program he has created, but more importantly, he takes pride in the students and their successes. Their success equals his success. And last year, I witnessed my son begin to lose the love for the game he has always loved since he first started playing at the age of 5. But Sam is more confident now, and I have seen the love of the game renewed. That in itself is worth 10x what I paid for in lessons. Jermaine is a great person, exactly the type of man you want mentoring your son. I highly recommend him in his hitting program. Gabe just finished their tournament and batted .333 with a 618 OBP and 1160 OPS. His plate discipline was impressive. Although he only struck out 3 times in 8 games played, he picked up for another team this tournament. They batted him in the cleanup spot, even though they had a couple of big, powerful kids. He led the team in OPS, on-base percentage, and stolen bases. It means so much to Gabe to have a former big leaguer as a mentor. Feel free to use any of the videos I've sent you if you ever need to show others how you help Gabe cut out all the extra movement, turning him from a leadoff hitter to a cleanup hitter. That is the least we can do. Thanks again, man. You're amazing at what you do. Glad we found you. Now, if you're ready to fix these problems once and for all and take your game to that next level, I'm offering a live free swing breakdown with me or my team. What we're going to do is we'll personally break down your swing, tell you exactly what you need to do to take your game to that next level, whether that is to be more consistent or hit for power. So if you're interested in that, link will be below. Definitely book it because we're not going to be doing this forever. So if you're interested, take advantage of that right now while it's on the table. Go below and click the link. Go over there, book your time. We'll talk and we'll talk you through exactly what you need to do to take your game to that next level. Now, if you're not ready for this and you're struggling with your swing, you want to click on this video right here. It's going to tell you exactly how to hit more line drives. It's 5 simple steps that you need to do, similar to what we're doing here, that'll walk you through a proper swing so you can start hitting line drives. You can start hitting doubles, start hitting, maybe even hit your first or your next home run. So with that being said, this video right here is the next video that I recommend. Thank you.